Welcome back, everybody.
I have to say that one of the reasons I've stayed in community is because of Jenny Truax.
Oh, me too, Jenny Truax.
Y'all are very
And Angie
sweet.
Shufflebein.
Very sweet.
Okay.
Let's talk about co-housing and what it was, when it happened, and why it started.
We figured it out the other day when it happened. Was it 91 or 92 or
Liz has it on his
93?
timeline.
Co-housing
Anyway, yes.
was 2000 to 2005.
Thank you very much. It was after 2000. It all kind of runs together. Here I was at Karen House. I had just turned 40 years old. And I can't be so, it was 2000. Yeah, no, I was a little bit 40. So I recently turned 40. And I was just loving my time at the house. I loved being here. I didn't have any intention to leave. I had been really happy in the community. But I think maybe we'd been having many conversations over a couple of years, maybe a year or so, about how we could make real some of the really more radical elements of the Catholic worker in terms of it's really building new society in the shell of the old. And there are many ways in which being a Caring House we do that, I think. I think we do that just by the way that we receive our company, our guests who come to stay with us. And I think for all of our faults and all the mistakes we make, I think that people really do like coming here. I just saw one recently and she said, I just love Caring House. I've heard that so many times. And it's because it's more like home and it's more of a community and it's something out of the system. It's just different. But for all of that, there are the struggles of being big, of being short-term, even though we're longer-term than almost any other shelter. But it's still not permanent. It's and then because we have people with substance use problems coming and going, you have rules, and just to make it work, you have rules that you wouldn't necessarily have in your home, you're living with someone. And so that kind of sets up this inequity we've talked about as part of our anti-oppression, anti-racism stuff. And I think I was aware of that early on, that I really longed to have more right relationships with people that were just and kind of more consensual in a way. More, the power was more equal. That's what I'm trying to say. And so, I also had this dream that we would have a way that people could live economically. And so I had been even thinking lots of things about, what do we call them, economic things that we do together, kind of ministries, kind of things, and just different stuff. And the other thing I had thought of was that I felt like I'd seen a couple children die who had been with us. Teenagers were shot. And I think one had happened fairly recently when I began to think about co-housing. I can't even remember who it was, it's terrible. Oh, it was Sam.
Yeah.
Boo. He was one of the kids I most loved in all my time at Karen House. I had taken food to the family for years, and when he was like 11 and 12, he would help me. By the time he was 13, the family was moving because they were being threatened to firebomb. He was already dealing drugs. Not dealing, he was carrying them, which they often do with younger guys. They have them carry drugs, so watch out for people. So he got involved in all that stuff, and it just broke my heart. He was shot dead in the street on Manchester. And I remember thinking, we kids, and I'll tell one more story if I can. There's a little boy who lived here with his mother, and she had a terrible problem with alcohol. He was an alcoholic and drinking, and he had a little 2-year-old brother. He was 6, and he took care of his brother. He was a primary care provider. And he was another kid. I just loved him so much. And he said to me, this is the best place I have ever lived. And he knew he was going off, and I think we ended up putting her out, and I helped him get into school when he left and stuff. But I felt like I was casting him to the wind, And so there was that feeling that we need to build. It's the same thing I talked about recently at the Catholic Group Gathering, that we need villages of hospitality. We need relationships that are long-term, where we really live together. So this idea of what we call Dorothy Day co-housing, we got a series of apartments over on Helen Street that were available at one time pretty much because of Pruitt-Igoe Development Corporation had them, and we had friends. Mike was part of that, Larry Chapman, and so we had friends who were part of that, and I was actually connected to it. So we rented these apartments out with the idea that we would live, you know, and share our lives together, have a weekly meeting, have meals together. I had a vision of doing some economic sharing, which never materialized for a bunch of reasons. So anyway, and you know, had all these ideas, having a garden, had all these ideas that we were just going to start that village. And so there were moments in that, and I want to say a few things, and I want to hand it over to you because I'm talking a lot. But there are moments that were like pure heaven. I mean, our first party we had over that field, going to the Lake Carlisle
I was
together.
gonna mention that lake, yeah.
I mean, I can't even tell you, I thought, oh my gosh, I've arrived at heaven, at the reign of God. I mean, we were there. And it was just so perfect, you know. And so there were just lots of moments like that. But the struggles, which I've talked with you all about, which I'll not tell the camera, many struggles. You know, I should really sit down and pray about it sometime and really find a way to describe them honestly, as honestly as I can. But there are many, and you know, we're just human, and so, but some of the things were that we tried to be too much to each other when our lives were not connected enough. So we had 6 families, and maybe 6 or 8 former or current Catholic workers. And the 6 families were people who had been guests. And there were 40 members of the families, like a bunch of kids. And we had big families, 8 kids in one family, 6 in another, all big families, 8 in another, I think. So we had huge families. And so, you know, there was the whole issue that I had this beautiful vision, now I can see. I mean, this vision that on paper could make you weep. But it didn't. I drew up the vision in some degree. I mean, we talked about it, and you know. But the women who came probably wasn't how they were defining the vision for their life. You know what I mean? Now looking at it, I can see that. I mean, to me, it was the vision of heaven, but you know, it was based on Catholic worker thinking a lot. But probably they wasn't. Who knows if I said, "What do you want?" It might have been different. So some of it was just, you know, we had this vision, but people did love it. I mean, there was another way in which, like coming here, it was like, it's kind of like Dorothy had this vision. I didn't know I wanted to be a Catholic, but I was like, because it's beautiful, you know. But so there was some of that, and so in some ways we just took off. But then the things that really were difficult for us, I think, were that because we didn't share our everything, we asked things of each other that were almost too much to ask when you don't share everything. So we had a woman who was 8 children, and one of her kids starts getting in trouble at school, starts getting involved in gangs, even came and stole something at Karen House, from Karen House. And she wants to protect her child. Her allegiance to her child is much stronger than her allegiance to community. And then you're back in the power thing of how does the community approach that problem? And so we try honesty, we try different things. Another time we had an issue where a woman took a bat and was about to hit another woman. And there wasn't any even consensus among any of us about how to approach these things. And we ended up not doing enough. And at first we solved these things, but as time went on, we just solved them less and less. And I felt after about 2 years, 3 years, I knew that I felt we weren't going to make it, you know. So I kind of kept, I would often say, I wonder if we should just stop meeting and just kind of become close friends. But anyway, and then there were other issues. I got married, so my time was less and I was too spread out. Some people had houses, some only had apartments. We weren't going to be able to, they were hoping to be able to rent to own, and that wasn't going to happen at some point. I felt like that was just toward the end, I guess, the very end. But there were just many, and then there were problems with how the apartments were taken care of. There were, you know, all kinds of interpersonal dynamics. We had a partner come back from jail selling heroin and using heroin and having guns in the house. We only had 6 rules and they were all broken. But none of us, there were just so many weaknesses on all of our parts. So there's no one, you could say, oh, there's so much to look at in terms of it. But all that being said, and even its imperfections, I would still do it over again. And so you have this vision, and you don't know where it's going, but things happen that you don't expect, and much good comes out of things. This would be my encouragement to you with your family. So little did I know that then the downtown teens would kick off from that Carolyn came and stayed, and that we've moved more into the neighborhood and kind of have small hospitality all over, that we're becoming this village, even though it wasn't in the way I had planned. It's kind of happening in little ways, has potential. So the downtown teens, Dewan is Mary Whitney, my stepdaughter, so he's my son-in-law. This is for those who don't know. So one of the families of co-housing is very close to me now. They live in a little house with us, and I'm very close to that family, and one is my son-in-law. So, but you're becoming my son-in-law. I have a grandchild through that family. So just much that I would not have expected has happened, and I'm very close to them. And the story's still going on, and so I learned much, and I would try to do some things differently, but there was a lot to it, and a lot of good came out of it, and much to have been learned from it, about even my own issues of how to work with others. What is real consensus? Real consensus is not just having a meeting where not people voice disagreement. It's really finding something common that people agree upon that's really right and just, and we might have done it, with a lifetime together, and maybe, but anyway, so that's kind of it. So after 5 years, we didn't have meetings anymore, and it's been much more fun ever since, in some ways, but a lot of good. That's it. I'm so sorry, thanks so much.
That's fine. I think no matter what, and I tell Teka this a lot, that she feels like sometimes it was a failure, and I think in no way was it a failure. Perhaps it's not continuing in the form that we expected, but certainly Shannon and I are still sharing co-housing, and that's been going on for a really long time, and it has changed my life. I live on Helen because of co-housing. Grace House started because of co-housing. I was living on North 18th Street, and it was once people started moving into those apartments on Helen that I was sitting in my apartment on Good Friday thinking, I need to move over to Helen. Like, I had started some hospitality in my little 3-room apartment, but I just knew that I needed to be where the women were, and at that time it was a pretty difficult street in the neighborhood, and yet I just had a really strong sense that that's where I needed to buy a house. And any reasonable person would think, what the hell are you thinking? And I did it, and it's been an amazing 10 years that I've been over there, and the fact that Shannon and I are still hanging out and living together has been really such a blessing in my life. And the other thing, I was just talking to Elizabeth about this last night, but another thing I think from the co-housing experience was that we went into each other's homes, we had meetings in Tracy's house and in Sandy's house and Lorraine's house, and we cooked for each other, and there was a lot of love there, and it wasn't.
Yeah, that's really true.
It really was a lot of love there, and we are connected to those families in a way that we never ever would be.
Right.
And the story goes on and on, it's that little, what is it, the pebble in the pond, where the just circles keep going bigger and bigger out, but so many lives, I think, have been affected. Mine certainly has, and hopefully the lives of the children and the women and all of our lives have been changed dramatically, I think, because of that. And I think sometimes you can never estimate exactly what has been the extent, but I just think that there was love there, and it was worth it.
Yeah, it was. There were moments that were just amazing.
Yeah. So for that I'm really grateful, and really, really grateful.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
That's great.